lot of new information. I want to first off thank the crowd for everything that you've been sending, and it's been extremely helpful. And I want to talk to you about two people that have hit me up that I think are significant. One of them was election night. I went to a party on election night in Baldwin Hills with some friends of mine and was having a good time, and I got tapped on the shoulder by a young woman who wanted to hear about the Tupac and Biggie murders and what I knew about the Tupac and Biggie murders. We sat down and started having a conversation. About 30 minutes into the conversation, she said, "My father is former LAPD." And I looked at her age and thought, oh, this can't be good. And I thought, okay, who's your father? And she said her father was Rafael Perez. At that point, I kind of changed my tactic. I started continuing to tell her everything that I know about the Tupac and Biggie murders, but I also started getting information from her. I said, what does your father say? Well, her father said he was involved in the Tupac and Biggie murders. And I talked to her about her father's military career. I talked to her about a lot of things. And I've come away with some conclusions about Rafael Perez. And, I actually think she's an incredible human being. She's a really upstanding citizen, working hard, has a good mother, and you know what, has parenting from her father too. And I think whatever he did as a cop, the bad things that he did, he instilled in her a moral compass. And, I think, when we look at all of these people, whether it be, people that were involved in these murders or other murders or what have you, they all have kids. They all have families. They all have, they have reasons why they do things that they do. And he clearly has an amazing daughter. And, whatever his involvement, and we know quite a bit about his involvement in both of these murders, we still have things that we have yet to learn about that. Now, one thing that we know for sure is he was given blanket immunity for everything that he did back in that era, including something to do with a neighbor's cat. And that was one of the LAPD sources that told me about something Rafael Perez did with a neighbor's cat. I'm going to show you at the end of this a clip of, well, it's not really a clip, but it's something that I got from the Wallace civil trials. They stipulated, the city of Los Angeles stipulated that Rafael Perez was at the Peterson Automuesuem the night Biggie was murdered. And, we obviously have learned from other sources that he was there. But this is the city of Los Angeles stipulating that he was there. They came out and said it. So it's no longer anything that can even be disputed. And you have Eugene Deal's recent release of his video. And so we have some pretty interesting information. Then a few months after that, I was at a party where Ted Field came and sat behind me at a poetry reading at a friend's house. And after the poetry reading, I had a conversation with Ted Field. And Ted wanted to know what I knew about the Tupac and Biggie murders. And Ted Field and I actually have another connection. And when I was a kid, I grew up in the movie business, and Ted Field tried to buy my father's company in 1992. It was 1991, 1992. Ted Field tried to buy my father's company. And a friend of mine worked for Ted Field at Panavision Hollywood, which Ted Field owned Panavision. And so there was another connection. And Ted and I talked about that briefly. He remembered that he was trying to buy the company, which he wasn't successful in buying the company, but I was knee-deep in that acquisition process, dealing with all the paperwork and what have you. And he immediately wanted to get back to the Tupac information. And he looked at me and he said, you know, it was this whole Orlando Anderson thing. And I looked at him and I said, Ted, you know that's not true. And he looked at me and he said, well, yeah, I do know. It's not true. And then he said, oh, it was the whole East Coast, West Coast thing. And I looked at him and I said, Ted, you know that's not true. And he said, well, yeah, I do know it's not true. And he goes, well, actually, nobody knows what happened to Tupac. And Ted's girlfriend was there, and she said to him, well, Mike seems to think he knows. And I said, yeah, I do know. And I started telling him exactly what happened. And before I could even start, he goes, well, was it the corrupt cops thing? And I was like, yeah, but let me tell you how it happened. And I started walking him through, point by point, the Russell Poole theory. And it was to the point that he could not bear the conversation and he had to bolt from the room. And he left abruptly. And anyway, so those are two people that have recently hit me up. Now, one person that I talked to today told me that he is the one that handed Harry O's money in a brown bag, a grocery bag, full of $100 bills to Suge Knight and David Kenner. And he said he was the one that handed him that money. So he's somebody that I'm going to be talking to a little bit more in the coming days. We have another connection. I grew up in Los Angeles. I grew up in Hollywood. My father was a lighting director. My grandfather was a teamster whose last film was the movie Jaws. And for, you know, ever since 2004, I had a newspaper in Century City with, you know, 2,000 articles that I've written, 260 front covers, and did a lot of favors for a lot of people, and a lot of those favors are starting to come back to me. I did a recovery newspaper for 4 years where I sent recovery articles and what have you into the prisons and what have you in Los Angeles. And so I got to meet a lot of people through the recovery community as well. Even though I'm not a member of the recovery community myself, I had too many alcoholics around me growing up, and I just decided that wasn't something I wanted to do personally. And so I've always just kind of steered clear of drugs and alcohol. But because I have these deep ties into the community, it's definitely yielding results. And especially with this new crowdsourcing thing, people that know me and what have you that have information are coming forward, and we're getting good information about all of this. Rafael Perez's daughter was one source of good information, and she is a very upstanding citizen, and I think the product of good parenting. And whatever Rafael Perez was guilty of before and guilty of during the Rampart scandal, one thing he is definitely, to his credit, is that he has done a good job raising his daughter, because she's a great, upstanding citizen. And there's a lot more to come. There's a lot of information that's starting to hit us, and the crowd is definitely coming up with good results. And we're going to sift through it, and we're going to start putting out more and more videos about the information that we're receiving. And just want to reach out and say thank you to all of you who have been supportive of this crowd-sourced investigation. And let's keep the crowdsourcing happening, because it's definitely yielding results. Anyway, more later. Enjoy the few photos that you're going to see. And then the stipulation that the city of Los Angeles stipulated that Rafael Perez was at the Peterson Automotive Museum the night that Biggie was killed.
I got a big mouth. Came out. I talk from my heart. I'm real. Man, this shit don't stop. Man, this shit don't stop. My brother got popped. When my brother got popped, then I lost my top. Man, this shit so hot cause we still on that block. Damn, all the allegations, I ain't with the play. California basic vacations. Damn, all the petty waiting, I am so impatient. Tupac, hope you in peace, in peace.
Rest in peace to Machiavelli, Don. Cardinelli.
Black mama.
And when I say thug life, I mean that shit. Cause these white folks see us as thugs. I don't care what y'all think. I don't care if you a lawyer, if you a man, if you an African American, if you whatever the fuck you think you are. Them thugs and niggas for these motherfuckers. And until we own some shit, I'ma call it like it is. How you gonna be a man in the store? No. And we have to go by 5 different houses. Ain't a man in either one of them motherfuckers. How we gonna be a man? How we gonna be African Americans? We all these guys.
Young black males out there thinking about thug life, but I could handle it, but not right away.
Sick of this place.